Addiction is a neurological disorder that affects the reward system in the brain.
Okay, so everyone that is watching this video, let's pretend this is your brain.
Having and using this organ to its maximum capacity goes without saying.
To process information, to excel in school or at work, or in almost any endeavor.
It also goes without saying that if our brain is damaged, disabled, or made less efficient, it will have a large impact on how smart we are, how successful we are, and ultimately, how happy we are.
There are 150 billion neurons in that brain, in each one of your brains.
What was that again?
The brain consists of billions of neurons, or nerve cells, which communicate via chemical messages, or neurotransmitters.
Brain gets damaged by drugs like alcohol, marijuana, inhalants, and other substances.
Hydrocodone is a prescription drug that is often referred to as Vicodin, Vic, or Watson 387.
The major reward pathways involve transmission of the neurotransmitter dopamine from the ventral tegmental area.
Once ingested, hydrocodone travels to the brain's central nervous system, where it binds to opioid receptors in the pleasure centers of the brain, producing a euphoria and sedation, which is part of the reason why it is so addicting.
This causes dopamine release from the neurons into the synaptic space. Dopamine then binds to and stimulates dopamine receptor on the receiving neuron. This stimulation by dopamine is believed to produce the pleasurable feelings or rewarding effects. Dopamine molecules are then removed from the synaptic space and transported back into the transmitting neuron by a special protein called dopamine transporter. Most drugs of abuse increase the level of dopamine in the reward pathway. Some drugs such as alcohol, heroin, and nicotine indirectly excite the dopamine-producing neurons in the VTA so that they generate more action potentials.
For more than 23 million Americans fighting addiction, quitting it's just not a matter of willpower. New research actually reveals that substance abuse causes lasting changes in brain function. Folks that we know that have gone through treatment say once an addict, always an addict. There's truth to that, right?
In a healthy person, the reward system reinforces important behaviors that are essential for survival, such as eating, drinking, sex, and social interaction. Drugs of abuse hijack this system, turning the person's natural needs
Is
into
a
drug
complex
needs.
thinking machine made up of several important areas.
Engaging in enjoyable activities generates action potentials in dopamine-producing neurons of the VTA. Stimulated, an electrical impulse called an action potential is generated and travels down the axon to the nerve terminal. Here, it triggers the release of a neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft, a space between neurons. The neurotransmitter then binds to a receptor on a neighboring neuron, generating a signal in it, thereby transmitting the information to that neuron.
Over time, constant abuse of this drug may also result in potentially life-threatening liver failure. In fact, with daily use, most people will become addicted to hydrocodone within 1 week, experiencing physical withdrawal symptoms without the drug. Unfortunately, hydrocodone overdoses are common and can lead to slowed breathing, unconsciousness, and even death.
Cocaine acts at the nerve terminal. It binds to dopamine transporter and blocks the reuptake of dopamine. Methamphetamine, a psychostimulant, acts similarly to cocaine in blocking dopamine removal. In addition, it can enter the neuron into the dopamine-containing vesicles, where it triggers dopamine release even in the absence of action potentials. Different drugs act in different ways, but the common outcome is that dopamine builds up in the synapse to a much greater amount than normal. This causes a continuous stimulation, maybe overstimulation of receiving neurons, and is responsible for prolonged and intense euphoria experienced by drug
Cerebellum
users.
helps us maintain things like posture and balance.
The structures in the limbic system are important because this is where we process survival feelings like fear and anger, and pleasurable ones like
Exactly
taste
the
and
brain
touch.
looks like in someone who has addiction, who's going through this, is a pretty remarkable thing. And I think it gives us a lot of insight into how it should best be treated and to also understand it. That's what I'm trying to do. Imagine, for example, as you take a look at this animation I'm about to show you, that someone takes a drug of some sort. What happens there, and this is the middle of the brain, is that there is a sense of euphoria. That's dopamine there, those small little particles. That makes you feel good.
Is it any kind of drug? I mean, we're talking everything from cocaine to Xanax.
Yeah,
anything.
Just about any kind of drug, and not even drugs necessarily. It can be other things too, certain food substances, sugar, for example.
Diencephalon helps us control our movement. It contains the hypothalamus. This little area regulates important functions in the body like temperature, hormones, and a lot of other important things.
Two of the largest structures are called the amygdala and the hippocampus. It uses these areas to help remember.
You have that euphoria, but in someone who's a true addict, take a look at this picture here. On the left side of the brain is, you see the bright areas? That's still feeling good, that's the euphoria. But on the right side is someone who has an addiction now, not as much of that bright spot, and that is relevant. Why? Because they need more and more of the substance to try and get that euphoria back. Think about that for a second. You take the substance, you feel good, but in an addict, that good feeling doesn't last. So what do? You take more than ever before. And that's sort of the basic, sort of simplistic, but basic form of addiction.
Are those changes permanent?
Well, they last a long time. And exactly how long is a little bit of a subject of controversy. But people say you can eventually get to the point where your brain does feel natural pleasure again, but that can take some time. What doesn't go away is this idea of the memory of the addiction. So let's say you're a cigarette smoker, quit for 10 years. Pick up another cigarette and start smoking again, and right away you can go back into addiction.
Repeated exposure to dopamine surges caused by drugs eventually desensitizes the reward system. The system is no longer responsive to everyday stimuli. The only thing that is rewarding is the drug. That is how drugs change the person's life priority.
This is the part of the brain that really separates us from other animals. This is where we think, produce language, hear stuff, see stuff, know that something's funny or stupid. Right now, this is the part of the brain that's allowing you to watch this video and understand what I'm saying.
You aren't just cured. It's a constant battle to stay away from the temptation or feel that euphoria, right?
You need a lot of the substance to get that euphoria back, so that's why relapse occurs so quickly. They say 3 days of acute withdrawal, which is painful, 3 months where you're the most sort of subject to relapse again, and 3 years before you really start having natural sort of pleasure again from substances.
After some time, even the drug loses its ability to reward, and higher doses are required to achieve the rewarding effect. This ultimately leads to drug overdose.
And this is your brain on crystal meth.
Don't remember where I was. I realized life was a game. The more seriously I took things, the harder the rules became. Oh, I had no idea what it cost. My life passed before my eyes. Oh, I found out how little I accomplished all my plans tonight. So as you read this note, my friends, I'd love to stay with you all. Please smile when you think of me. My body's gone,